Now, it's my pleasure to present today's presenter, Todd Snelgrove. Todd is a global subject matter expert in value buying and selling. As founding partner experts in value, he helps companies drive the value strategy from ideation to financial realization by making sure that value is created, calculated, communicated, and priced for. So with that, Todd, welcome.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Leverage Point, for always putting together these great educational sessions. And I think hopefully we're seeing slides pop up.
I am.
Great, and we're gonna cover a lot of width today, so I'm gonna move relatively quickly and try to cover a lot of things. Hopefully are practical takeaways for the people that are in the field and the teams that are trying to support them and getting paid for value. So I spent 20 plus years in industry working for an industrial company called SKF, make bearings, things that turn, but lots of competitors, lots of other people that made things that looked the same and smelled the same and fit in the same spot. And when you're 10, 20, 30% higher priced, how do you communicate what is value? How do you get procurement to want to pay for that value? So I became, I wouldn't say the first, but this global VP of value, commercial excellence. And, there's kind of four things that I always focused on. And I think Nick hit on them. Are you creating something that is of value to the customer, not just to your engineering or product development teams? Are you quantifying that? I mean, all the research shows, my practice shows, 25 years with customer shows, procurement says, if you can quantify it, if you can calculate it, they will pay you for it. Are you communicating it in your sales and marketing? Sometimes I think we do a lot of neat things and then we fail to communicate it properly. And then are we pricing for it? And there's a few things on pricing I want to cover. I think hopefully some of them are some interesting takeaways right away. It's like, wow, that's something we do that might actually be hurting our value discussion. So you're going to hear me mention a term called total profit added, which is really just an evolution of total cost of ownership. I'll explain the differences and why. And a lot of the examples will come from the new edition of the book, Value First, Then Price. And it's really about, how should we sell, but also how should people buy? So I think what's great about this book, there's, I think, 5 or 6 procurement experts, some academic, but some practitioners that say, here's how I want you to engage with me. Here's what I want you to do. And if you do this, I'm willing to pay you for it. So I think, it's great to hear how people want to buy. And you'll see some examples as we go through the presentation. So as I mentioned, B2B background in general, a lot of different industries from high tech to industrial to finance to et cetera, et cetera. But again, always companies that add value, they're trying to find a way to demonstrate it and get paid for it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor. I'm going to spend part of my discussion talking about procurement or the financial buyer. I want to be clear though before I get there, because sometimes I think I skip through this maybe too quick. The technical buyer is very important. When I started in industry in Canada back in the mid-90s, the engineer, the technical buyer, so an IT, the technical IT person or engineer, the doctor, the people that were going to use it, whatever, the smart people, as I would say, they had all the power. And for sure, they're the ones that are going to use the product or service. They're the ones that are going to realize the value. And it was kind of told, hide from procurement, because all purchasing wants to do, and we'll talk about the differences in a moment, is talk unit price. So hide from them. Turns out that's not a good strategy. So that's experience talking, but also procurement people saying, if you don't come to me proactively with something that I can put my teeth around and believe there's value there, and it's just your name, or you take somebody out for dinner, or it's a relationship, I'm not willing to pay for that. So of course we need the technical person that's going to use your product or service to see value in it, to measure it, to help them with the business case, but we also need to engage the financial people early, often, and with the right information, quantify value, to have that discussion. So I'm suggesting we add that, not get rid of the other part. So this is from the first edition, but I think there's a lot of meat here. I could probably spend the whole hour on this, but sitting with a professor named Jim Anderson, who's since retired from Kellogg, who spent 30 years of his career in value management, his consulting relationships, my in the field plus consulting relationships. The question was, so many companies want to sell value. So many companies believe they create value. What are they doing wrong in their value management strategy or program if they have something specific that's maybe not enabling them to realize that? So sitting with the Professor Anderson, he drew this out. We were just having a chat, and it was amazing how he was able to put this, what I call the Fishbone Diagram, together. He sent it to me the next day, and I was like, wow. He goes, let's look at the ability to sell value. Does it start with your value conceptualization? And whether it's product or service, I'll talk service specifically later, but from the value quantification in general, they're interchangeable. They both create value. They both can be measured. I'll talk about that later. But don't get concerned if I say product more than service. But, you know, one thing I realized from my practice is a lot of times people develop things and they get it to marketing and go, here, oh, by the way, what's the value message? Oh, put some numbers on this. It's probably too late. I won't go into 1,000 examples of products and services that companies have got to market after hundreds of millions of dollars that didn't resonate because they didn't ask the customer, they didn't do the research. What is the value? Is that value something the customer is willing to pay for? I found one big company that would say, Mr. Customer, would you be interested if we could do this? I'll take anything for free, yes. Not, are you willing to pay for this? Two completely different questions. So taking the value management strategy and putting it in the product development process, and I believe that was one of the early things that Leverage Point focused on. Number two, the value selling process. We'll talk about that specific slide, but don't wait to the end to try to come in Hail Mary. Oh, by the way, you know, you talked to our company, we talked all these great things. Oh, by the way, now that you're focused on price, let me run the business case. Be proactive, get in there early, build the case so the conversations around what value, how measurable is it, what's the probability early. I had way too many phone calls when, you know, the deal was ready to close and the problem was pricing, come in and get the customer to think value. It's a lot tougher at the end, I can tell you that. Do you have a sales tool? I mean, again, you know, when I started 25 years ago, there wasn't something, it was the back of a piece of paper. What I would suggest is use something like Leverage Point now, invest your time, money, and effort on implementing, not on building a tool. Because the tool is important, but at least my experience is it's implementing is where the money happens. Use what's there and spend your time and money on implementing, where a lot of companies do the exact opposite. They'll fool around and try to create their own Excel thing and make formulas that are wrong. I can talk to people during the Q&A if they want to hear some funny stories of mistakes that I've seen. And then they realize that they go, why am I not getting the value? You didn't implement. That's where the rubber meets the road. Training. Okay, we've got spin selling, we've got the challenger, we've got a bunch of different training modules or concepts. They all, to me, roll around value in different ways. But have you trained the team exhaustively on what value is? And not just, you know, how to question for value, how to close for value, but all the things around value. And I think the final point here is it ongoing? Is it a one and done thing? And the sales team just going to go flavor of the month. Next week, it'll be this program. Next week, it'll be that program. I'm going to duck my head, Todd, because it's going to go away. It's flavor of the month. Culture change programs, which value initiatives are, need an ongoing thing. Again, that's why a lot of companies will have a full-time one person to drive that. So that would give you the skill set, the ability to sell and price and get paid for value. But, you know, how do you make the team want to do it? Okay, and one thing I find funny when C-level people come up to me and say, you know, I've equipped our team with the tools and the training, they still don't do it. Well, it turns out maybe their sales compensation model doesn't align with it. And I don't know if I've got the slide in here, but my old CEO would make a comment such as, I've got 400 different ways to cut a price. There's a process to cut a price. There's an escalation to cut a price. There's amounts you can cut price. So I've kind of told them I can do that. So I've given them the tools to do that. And then have I incentivized them not to. Publicly traded companies, net profit, not this EBITDA stuff, net profit, 5% price reduction can be half the profit. If all you're going to do is take the $10 million sell and reduce it by 5% and say, Todd, I'm only going to credit you, you know, that amount, as my people would say to me, I can go golfing for that amount. Who cares? I can go chase another deal for that amount. You realize the 5% price cuts half the profit. Ooh, maybe the commission model, the sales compensation model will change very dramatically. We'll talk a little bit about giving customers value buying options and giving them bundles and choice. But I think it's very important. Everybody can talk about value, and then when the customer says, well, you're willing to put some fee at risk, they say, well, we can't do that. Yes, you can. It's not as hard as people think. I think we need to give customers those choices, and we can move them based on how we structure it. Business culture. I was very lucky. I had a CEO that believed in this wholeheartedly. I mean, he'd be on stage. It was part of our annual report. It was part of our shareholder event. There was interviews on TV. But, we've got to create more customer value than our competitors. We've got to communicate that to our customers. We got to get them to appreciate that value so they pay us for it. That's the only way to differentiate in a market that is perceived as commoditizing and a lot of competitors. And then I probably spent a lot of my time, still do, on customer culture. As I said, and we'll talk about the buying process. If you wait to the very end and say, oh, don't buy this based on price, it might be too late. Get in early so the next time they're thinking about buying whatever you make or have services for as your company, they're thinking, wait a minute, I need to rethink this. Maybe there's more value there that I didn't realize. And okay, so the ability to quantify value. So two things, I don't want to be academic here, but there's two academic terms that are very important. And I'll tell you two specific real life stories. One is called the ability to pay, ATP. So people would say, the customer doesn't have the money. Great offering you have. Your whatever is better than everybody else's. That's great, but there's no money in the bank. So I'm having this conversation with some C-level people, and in general, specifically my old CEO goes, that's not true. If somebody brings me a business case that is believable, has references, believable, probable, and there's a good risk reward. I'm not paying you $97 out of the $100 of value unless it's really hard. But you want me to pay this percentage of that opportunity and there's a high probability, I will go get the money. I'll go to the bank and borrow the money. And think about that. When you're buying something, I'm sitting there buying a washer and dryer, I'm buying a car, and somebody can say there's all this great neat stuff, but then they can put some numbers to it. It'll be less maintenance, less gas, less insurance, higher resale value, whatever it is. That can change my buying criteria and also allow me to unlock new funds to pay for it. Point number two, similar but different, willingness to pay. Todd, I've got 3 projects this year. I'm implementing a new ERP, we've got a new acquisition, and I've got COVID things I'm worried about as examples. I mean, what you're selling to me is neat, but it's kind of beneath the threshold of what I'm focused on. Yeah, because you're prioritizing that, thinking that's a wish to have or want to have. What if your competitor or you walked in and said, we think by upgrading your MRI machines, your airplanes, whatever it is you're selling, that's worth $1 million, as an example. Ooh, I didn't realize it was worth that much. Oh, you got my attention. There's a great chapter in the book by a gentleman named Rob McGuire that basically says the same thing. If you want my attention, put a number to it. That's the only way you're going to change my willingness to pay for it, because it goes from a need to have to, wait a minute, there's real money there. I spend a lot of time with colleagues, clients, consulting clients, and customers, making sure we're using the right term. Price, cost, and value are 3 different things. They mean 3 different concepts, and people transpose them. And hopefully from today, one of the takeaways will be, make sure they're using the right word. People sometimes conflate the idea that the price they pay for something is the same as the cost. Price is part of cost. I pay you $10, Todd, but then there's shipping and receiving and taxation. Then there's energy or ink or water. Then there's replacement blades for the razor. Okay, wait a minute. Price is part of cost, but it's not. And again, we don't have time, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but when a customer says your price is too high, you'd be able to say, are we talking about the price or having a lower cost? And I used to have an email signature, and Nick might remember this at Leverage Point, something to the effect that, I can be the highest price, but the lowest cost. That's what we should be discussing. Procurement people will tell me, it's funny enough, when they send out, those every 3-year letters, your costs need to come down to stay in line with the market, the usual threatening letter. How many salespeople come back with a price reduction? They're both 5-letter words. They mean 2 different things. Be confident, understand how you can affect a customer's costs, and say, let's have that discussion. And the final point I'll make here as I move along is that people assume that if they pay lower price for something, they'll be more profitable. That's an assumption. I can guarantee you this. If your costs go down, you'll be more profitable. So why would you take a potential price reduction, assume nothing else will happen, when a cost reduction actually hits your bottom line? Again, it's got to be hard, it's got to be real, it's got to be measurable. And values on the upside, which we'll talk about here in a moment. I love this slide, the Priceberg. My colleague put it together years ago. You know, Mr. Customer, you can see the price. It's visible. Yes, it's sitting right there. I understand that. And what procurement people tell me is they say, you salespeople don't do a good job, and they mean sales, marketing, companies, suppliers, don't do a good job of enumerating all those things below the waterline. You use very vague terms like reliability or responsiveness. So you don't put words that I can resonate with, that I can put numbers to. And even if I can, I don't know what numbers to put to it. And I think that that's our job on the selling side, is to equip the buyers with the business case to make the justification. And my point is, I don't care what the price is. It's whoever's got the smallest Priceberg that wins. Yes, my price might be bigger than that person's price, but the operating cost might be less. The residual value might be more. It might help you produce more. I'll talk about total profit added, I think, in the next slide, and what the difference is. Yes. So spend a little bit of time in this slide because I think it's a good methodology for everyone to take back to their business, product or service. We don't have time to go through a million examples here, but total cost of ownership, concept been around for a long time, depending on who you talk to, IT background, etc. But I kept saying, you know, I was with this professor specifically a long time ago, customers need to look at total cost, but they need to look at how you help them be profitable. You know, the last time I checked, companies care about earnings per share that are sustainable over a period of time. That comes from cost reductions, yes, cost. But there's a lot of things we can do as suppliers that help them become more profitable on the revenue side, on, you know, in different ways, on the margin side. I'll give you some examples. So it was Jim, he said, you can't say it's total cost of ownership, but it's different. You have to come up with a new term. And basically we agreed. And the first time I used it was at a procurement conference. And I said, our job as suppliers is to make you more profitable. You should look at who brings the most profit. Therefore, to be called total profit added. So that's where this term comes from. So we'll walk through an example here. I'm going to start with the product here, just to keep it, hopefully you can follow the logic. Somebody's going to make something, whether that's a car or a laptop or a gearbox or an airplane or a house, doesn't matter. Someone's going to make something, okay? And there's a bunch of engineers sitting somewhere, and they would love if they had no constraints. You know, build me a car that lasts forever and I don't care what the price is, or an excavator, whatever it is. That, you know, they'd love to over-engineer and build something, but they're told, you know, this is the end user price point. This is the functionality the customer wants and is willing to pay for. They're giving us some constraints, and in general, they will sit back in the office and say, you know, we need to make this machine meet that criteria. I mean, I could make that car, we'll just stay with the car example. I could make a car that lasts forever. It would be in diamonds and titanium and I don't know what else, but some material that's extremely expensive. So it's like, no, people aren't willing to pay that for that. So they're making a trade-off. Then it's like, can we actually make this? Is it possible to make this? And I can make some tolerance. Some of this is engineering stuff. But the stuff in green, that's not a cost reduction. What if you help your customer get to the market earlier? That's not a cost reduction, but it has a profit impact. In some industries, it's much more than others. For example, the pharmaceutical industry. You have a patent. It's 10 years, I believe. You wait 6 months because the packaging or the production or the shipping or the marketing or whatever it is isn't done. That's 6 months of what you paid, how much money to build. In the high-tech industry, if you're not to market with cell phones at different times of the year, I believe it's the back-to-school rush is the big push, the Christmas rush. I mean, I think we can see what happened to Peloton and Nike and a bunch of people last year when they missed the Christmas season. So, you know, time to market could be everything. What if you add value to their machine? I'm gonna work with you to help make your machine be easier to use less energy, way less, whatever that is. What's that worth to your customer? Now your machine's better than your competitors. Can you sell more of them? Can you sell more of them at a higher price? Those aren't cost reductions, but they help a customer be more profitable. So somebody builds something, then a company buys something, and this is a true story. So, you know, you got the acquisition phase here. And real quickly to go off story here, but 100 years ago, I was on stage, uglier slide than this, and my CEO had to sit in the audience for whatever, 60, 90 minutes. He came up to me afterwards and he goes, it's interesting how on our sales side, we can measure 400 customer variables, how we affect them and the impact of that. And then we actually are willing to enter into agreements based on that, and it's measurable. My issue is on my procurement side, my acquisition side. I have a team, and I'm going to make up a number that buys 5 billion euros a year of stuff. They say they buy in total cost, best value. I reward them on it. I give them all these KPIs. I send them money. But at the end of the year, Todd, I don't see my costs go down. I don't see the value go up. I want you to go talk to them and just see, we're measuring the same thing in the same way. So you can imagine the reaction from the chief procurement officer of a $10 billion company getting a call from a relatively young salesperson at the time saying, I want to talk to you about best practices on measuring value and buying value. Basically, we already do this, go away. And I said, look, your boss and my boss want us to talk. So his name was Bo Inge Stenson. He's become a very good friend of mine. He actually wrote a chapter for the book, and I'll show a visual from it later, I believe. But the first time we met, he goes, Todd, we measure that value. Tell me what we measure when we're making a buying decision. This is not an exhaustive list, but it gets you to the point. What's the price of that product or service that meets the minimum required, plus, who's paying shipping? What's the minimum order quantity? Can I return it? What's the lead time? Can I reduce my suppliers? Is there financial benefits of, consolidation, et cetera, et cetera? Is there an obsolescence policy that I can use, a return policy? These types of things. And at that point, I realized he was saying total cost of ownership, but his version of total cost of ownership and my version were two different things. He was talking total cost of acquisition. You'll hear the term landed cost. My point takeaway here is just because your customer uses the right term, I would stop and say, what do you measure? And if they won't tell you, say, here's how I can affect your business. And that's usually when I'm doing this on stage, procurement people go, wow, we didn't know that you could measure there. Two, that's the impact it had. So don't get confused or slowed down or whatever you want to call it because people say, oh, we buy total cost of ownership. There's a chance it could be landed costs. Somebody builds the machine, procurement buys the machine for somebody to use, whether it's the company car or the laptop we use or our cell phones, whatever. And at this phase, it gets installed, operated, maintained. The terminology might be different, but I think hopefully you see the logic. So I'll give you some examples in other industries real quickly afterwards. But I bought this machine. I'm going to install it. Okay, well, how much energy does it use? How much lubrication? How much water? How much ink? How long will it last, do I think? When it fails, can I fix it? We know there are some companies that will sell their original equipment or their original services at a low price to get the order, but then when you want parts, you can only get them from them, or the part price is very high, or you can't substitute them, or stay within warranty. It's like, okay, can I get the parts? On this example here, am I helping my customer increase production, revenue, throughput, quality, yield? Those aren't cost reductions, but they have a huge profit impact. I won't go through all these things, but you get the idea. And then finally, disposal, which most people don't look at because you look at throwing it away. But in some worlds, disposal is probably the most important number. Think of a car. Is it the price you pay for the car, the price to operate the car, or is it the price that you sell the car for that has the biggest difference? It's probably the delta between what you bought it for and what you sold it for. So some of the car companies will say, and I'm making up numbers, yes, and things have changed. Yes, I'm $60,000 to buy, but the research shows that it'll be worth $30,000 in 5 years. Yes, you can buy the cheaper one that's $50,000, but it'll only be worth $15,000 in 5 years. It's built to depreciate. Well, I don't mind paying a little bit more if I'll get more back then. I care about the difference between the two. I won't go through a lot of examples anymore because of time, but in the renewable energy world, it's called levelized cost of energy. What's my total cost to build the place? What's my total cost to run the place? That divided by my revenue is my price per kilowatt. In the medical world, it's called total cost of care. Again, cost. So, okay, maybe one less blood test, that's a cost savings, but what about patient quality of life? What about, all these other things? So take the model, apply it to your world, and hopefully there's something there you can start from. Change the headers, don't get stuck in that. So the question is, where's the focus? Turns out there's a lot of research that says the money is not in the buying aspect. So if anybody on the call here is in the market to go buy a commercial aircraft, so think Airbus, Bombardier, Boeing. That represents 8% of the total cost of that asset over its life. Class 8 trucks, the big 18-wheelers you see, the initial purchase price is 11%. Industrial equipment, gearboxes, fans, motors, pumps, 12%. Light-duty pickup trucks for work, 12%. The rest of it is the depreciation, the fuel, the maintenance, the labor, the downtime, all those things we just talked about. So what I talk about here is the purpose of this research was to get OEMs that build things to get into the aftermarket where the services are. But I would use this slide with these types of customers, and it could be from different industries, but this is a true story. I was involved with the procurement of a bunch of hard assets for the company I worked, SKF, and they were these big machines. So assume they were 12%. If it's the best piece of research that we have, 12%. And Boeing asked me, out of the 3 suppliers that presented to us, which one do I think we should buy? And I'm making up numbers to keep it simple. I said, the one that's 10% more expensive. And he goes, oh, of course, the sales guy wants to spend more money buying something that's a little bit better. They all meet the minimum requirement. Why would I pay 10% more? And I said, because their presentation showed me that they could reduce our operating costs by 2%. I remember he looked at me, and I still don't know if he was being a smart aleck or not, but he goes, I don't know what math they taught you in Canada, but why would I spend 10% more to get 2% to pay 2% less in the future? And I smiled and I said, because you need the denominator to make this math work. 10% of 12% is 1.2. That's all it is. But 2% of the big number, 2% of 88, if memory serves me correct, is 1.76. It's about 40% more impactful. So don't look at 10%, don't look at 2%, look at that versus the impact they have. And then you go, wow. So what would a 3% reduction in energy or downtime or parts or extended life do? So these are kind of some of the framing slides I use with customers to go, maybe I should rethink this. Maybe there's a lot more value there. It's not the minimum criteria, and then anything that meets that is good enough. You see this in the consumer world. I don't think we have a lot of B2C people on, but real quickly, because I think it gives you some flavor. I mean, this is General Electric saying, hey, when you're switching your light bulbs in your house, yes, it might save you, and I'm making up numbers, 5 cents a kilowatt or whatever, it'll save you so many kilowatts times 7 cents. They're saying if you change your whole house, it's worth $2,000 over the life of it. It's $400 a year. Todd, I know you might look at the one light bulb and say, you're standing at wherever you buy light bulb, Home Depot, for example, why would I pay that much more to save that much? It doesn't look like much. If I change my whole house as it rolls over, that's some serious money. One of my favorites is, I think anybody on the call here has these low-priced airlines in their marketplace. They might have lower costs, and they translate that into offering a lower price. But, true story, this is BA, British Air, and I'm not here to promote BA, but their attempt to say, let's look at all these other costs. The cost to check in, the cost for the bag. I just flew to Florida, just 4 weeks ago. I paid $100 more to take a legacy airline, my favorite airline. I live in Michigan. You can probably figure out who it is. But it included my bags. It included my carry-on, because I want to take my computer in case I got stuck. And it also left me the flexibility to change my return if I wanted to. That to me was worth a lot more than the price saving taking the low-priced airline. So this is their attempt to say, let's put all these things together and figure out what it's worth. And then the last point, I won't go through the whole story, is what airport am I flying out of and what airport am I flying to and where is it? Some of these budget airlines fly to places there's no public transportation. They're far away from where I need to go. There's one flight a day, and maybe it's just my bad experience. If something bad happens, you're screwed for a whole day. So, they're trying to say, wait a minute, let's really just kind of walk through this. So, it might be nice to buy the more expensive thing, but what is the value there? It's, it's explicit value, and it gives justification. And the last example here, I think we're all familiar with Tesla. I think it's kind of funny. One of their initial TCO analysis years ago had all these different formulas built into it. What they didn't talk about was how many miles you would drive or kilometers you drive versus the price of fuel. So when I can't change numbers in a calculator, right away it makes me think it's a sales guy just making a business case that looks good on their behalf. So it's like, okay, that's not making me comfortable. But they finally made it so you can do some modification. But the original calculation had, and this is kind of I think an interesting takeaway. Well, Todd, if you have an electric car, you don't need to stop at the gas station. Fact, that's a proof point, yes. And you would probably do that once a week. Don't know, okay. And it probably takes you 5 minutes to do this. So what's 5 minutes a week times so many weeks? And I'm like, you lost the credibility of the whole argument because you got me into the minutia. And I remember with clients before, if we're arguing what labor rate per hour is, and I want to say it's 25 and they're saying 20, accept the 20. Do your calculation before you get in front of the customer and see the sensitivity. Do you need every dollar to make the calculation? It's not about being right. It's about being confident where the customer goes, okay, that makes sense. So this example where they stretch to the nth degree to try to pull something in, lost its credibility. The last point I'll make here, which is kind of funny, the biggest benefit they didn't talk about, what they in the second version, the original version they did, this one they don't, they talk about time savings, different time savings, not the 5 minutes a week of going to the gas station, but in a lot of markets now, if you have an EV car, you can go in a high occupancy vehicle lane. So imagine being in Toronto or San Francisco or Paris. I'm not sure if Paris has one, but I mean, the example was if you're in Palo Alto, it's a 20-minute drive, but with traffic, it's 50 minutes. You're telling me if I buy the more expensive car, I save 30 minutes each way, an hour a day. If I go to the office for, holy crap. You're telling me that I'm going to save 20 hours a month in commuting time? Now, we don't need to start putting dollars to Todd's commuting time, but I can tell you right away, I'm going, that starts to add some serious value. So sometimes the unexpected value drivers become the big ones when you start walking through the model. Time, 5 minutes a week, yeah. 30 minutes each way a day, that's an hour a day, that becomes serious. Procurement. Real quickly, I mean, the buyer, the person that writes the order, great person, we love that person, important person. They're following the rules, the processes, what they're told to do. So yes, we want to make sure they're happy. Purchasing is important because they might be the people we're talking to, but I think there's a difference between purchasing and procurement. Procurement is strategic. The chief procurement officer, higher level within the organization. If you want a company to stop and say, I need to rethink, and I'm just going to use an example here, how I buy office supplies, just as an example, that it's not lowest price that meets the delivery. I got to get to somebody and say, let's have a different business model. Let's put some value at risk here. Let's put some guarantee. It's probably not the purchasing person that's going to go, wait a minute, I'm going to change how I buy. You've got to find a way to get to procurement. Sometimes with value quantification and putting some risk at it, that's how you get access. So some slides on procurement. One of my favorite ones, this lady used to be with the AstraZeneca drug company out of the UK. Huthwaite is a sales training organization, but we were at a joint conference and I was presenting selling value and she was about buying. You can read it, but I'll read it. Suppliers don't come to us with a business case. It's what we want. Sell your value in our numbers. And my favorite part of quote, and she said this, but if you can't quantify your value, sales, marketing people, don't be surprised at the failure of procurement to do so. You realize how much work or how many things I have to buy? One day I'm buying this, next day I'm buying that, whatever. All you do is make and sell this, and you can't come up with any numbers to justify why I should pay you more? That's your job, not mine. The buying process. I think we talk about a lot, the selling process in our CRM tool and the like. And my good friend, Rob McGuire, was a chief procurement officer at 3 different global Fortune 1000 companies. He's a Scottish gentleman, and I've done a lot of work with him. But one time we were sitting somewhere, and he said, Todd, your problem, and I represent sales, marketing, and pricing, is you don't understand how I buy. Yes, I know you've got your sales process and your funnels and all that, but you need to think of how I buy to know how to engage me on a value journey. And I said, okay, Rob. And he drew this. Now, I'm going to take this to an example of each person here buying a car, because we probably had that experience at some point in our life. But this applies just to any business-to-business transaction. So, but to keep it simple, a need's identified. I need to buy a car. The other one's come off lease. The other one got into a car accident. I've got kids, whatever. A need has been identified. I've identified the need probably. I sit back and establish the specifications. I want a car, not a truck. I want a van, or whatever. I want a gas car, not a diesel car. I want gas, not electric. I'm not saying these are smart decisions, but they're my specifications based on my background, my assumptions, my knowledge of the world at that point in time. So I say, you want to know what? This is kind of what I want, I think. And then I say, who meets that criteria? And my example here is saying I don't want an electric car. That would automatically exclude a Tesla as example. Maybe I've had bad relationships with that certain company, so that gets rid of them. I said I want a family car, so that gets rid of Ferrari as an example. So I'm going to narrow my specifications down to, or my supplier base down to 2, 3, or 4. The research seems to be 3, for some reason, 3 bids. And now I'm going to go talk to them. Okay, I'm going to go call them. I'm going to do research online. I'm going to, ask them to propose something. They're going to do a lot of work. Us salespeople are going to write proposals and throw all of our value, great stuff in it and send it back. I'm going to get those proposals from the 3 car companies, and then I'm going to negotiate. And I'm going to leverage, and I'm going to trade-offs and all that fun stuff. Then I'll choose one car company and buy or lease the car. And then hopefully I look back over time, was I happy with my decision? Did it meet my specifications? So his point is, your ability to have a value discussion with me dramatically decreases over time. If you get to me early, Todd, you should look at price per mile as an example. So therefore you should look at, electric as an example. True story, company car years ago, one of them that was on the list was a diesel. I asked my previous experience growing up in Canada as a kid with an old diesel car, not a chance. I excluded it. My friend said, no, diesel's gotten much better than it used to be. You should really rethink that. So I was already in the buying process, and I got pulled out of it and had to rethink it because my friends at least weren't good enough or smart enough to tell me to rethink it. But if you don't engage early and you try to come in down here, in the proposal or RFQ stage and say, Mr. Customer, don't look at the price of whatever you're buying. Look at the total cost, the total value, and how we'll measure it. Trust me, you're a salesperson talking. So marketing, your big customer opportunities need to get there early, get there often, and have that value conversation. So the customer goes, wait a minute, next time I buy, I should really be thinking much bigger. And I won't go through all these statistics on the left here, but it's a Gartner study that basically says, you as a sales marketing person don't get to spend much time in front of the customer. They're talking to people, they're doing their own research, they're talking to friends in the industry, they're looking at reports from third-party people. Only 17% of their time is spent with the sales people, the supplier base. So within that, and say you're one of 3, in 6% of their overall buying journey, it's much tougher to get them to think of total cost, value, all these other elements. So we've got to get there early. We've got to get into where they learn, where they think to think differently. Now, this is a great story from my friend, the Chief Procurement Officer. He goes, funny thing I always notice with your technical salespeople, but I think with any salespeople is, the more I told you as a Chief Procurement Officer, I didn't value something, the more you would give me for free. And he goes, actually, I'm going to call it now my strategy of stupidity. The second I say, oh, yes, there's so much value there. Thank you for showing me all this value. And the second I acknowledge it, you're going to want to charge me for it. So I'm going to play dumb and say, I don't care. He goes, what at least your colleagues always did was you would come in as Superman and then say, if you don't care about that, I'm going to do even more. I'll do more free research. I'm going to do more work. I'm going to come in and reduce your inventory, whatever you do. I'm going to show you how great we are. So he goes, the more I played dumb, the more you gave me for free. And, the other thing he says, when you did it, you would tell me how easy it was that you did it. Well, if it was easy for you to do, I'm not going to pay you a lot for it. So, we could come in here and with a few hours, we could do this, this, and this to make this huge improvement that's worth all this to you. If you tell me it was easy for you to do, I'm not going to want to pay you for it. So the takeaways here are the strategy of stupidity goes, the only way to get for me to think is you show me this business case. I'm going to make up numbers. I think I could do all this great stuff for you. It's going to impact your bottom line by $150,000 this year. I don't care. That's not real numbers. No big deal. Okay, then we won't do it. And I have a friend who said, he was negotiating once and he did that, and the customer right away said, whoa, 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 but I want that. You just told me it wasn't worth anything to you. It's going to cost me money to do this. It's going to create a lot of value to you. You just told me you didn't believe the value. Therefore, why should I spend money doing something that you don't appreciate? So I'm not going to do it. The conversation changed quickly. You need to pull away your value to get to see the reaction, because they might say, well, wait a minute, I wanted that for free because I knew you're going to give it to me. Again, don't make everything look so easy. And his point was, if the business hates you, the business doesn't want to buy from you, it's probably not likely that I can give the order to you. But if there's 3 people that meet that criteria and I like one of the 3 versus the other 2, I can move that business. So I don't have all the power, but I've got more power than maybe you think. And when Nick and me were just talking about value quantification, products and services, and one of the takeaways from the newer book research is that actually in the old book, it's only 4 years old, but this is the process I go through when I'm trying to present value to customers, okay? And it's just the way I go through it, so take it for what you want. I start with, the technical reasoning is, I think you are here, and I think I can take you here because of ABC, my reasoning. And then I probably use some external studies, best practices, third parties, I've seen this, this, and this. Then I probably come back to my own company's examples. I find starting with external, companies that are best in class at this, see this type of improvement. If it's my own name to begin with, it's a sales pitch. If it's best class, people seem to nod better. And here's where I've done it. Okay. And then I say, okay, and this is something that I think is very important. Here's the minimum improvement I need to deliver to you to pay for this self or this investment. Too often we say, invest this amount of money, it's going to return this. Every salesperson's mentioned an ROI and a hope and a this and a that. I used to be able to say, and I don't have time to go through the math right now, but if you're here, which we kind of agree you are, here's best in class. I know that's a long way away. If you were to get there to be worth this, you realize we need your assets to run 3% longer, which is 2.5 weeks to pay for this. I don't need to produce this 500% ROI. Yes, you want 500% ROI, but I only need to be 2.5% improvement. And they would nod and go, wow, yeah, that's a small improvement to get just to cover my behind to the break-even point. And the final point we'll talk about in pricing is maybe we'll put some fee at risk. It's not as risky as it sounds, but you can do some pricing things here that say, fine, pay me X, but then pay me a bonus if I do Y. Customer might say, well, wait a minute, I'll just pay you the initial price and then I get all the benefit. But then we were talking about services, and this is from the new book. And I said, I understand services are different than products, but people that sell services are always like, oh, products are so easy. It says it uses 10% less energy. It says it's got a 3-year warranty. But there's always a caveat with that. That's if you do what I tell you to do. It could use 10% less energy if you align it and manage it and lubricate it and install it and all these other things, right? So when I'm talking about a service with somebody, whatever, engineering services, legal services, design services, here's where you are today. Here's your average throughput, output, days it takes you to do something, whatever, here's where you are. And, we know that, I think I can do this better. I've got the people, the processes, the tools, the experience, I think I can make this better. I think I could do your external legal stuff better than where you are today. I think I can make your building better, whatever. I'm going to make a performance claim. Then I would probably calculate the improvement. If we're able to do this, which does that, reduce your downtime, increase the speed of repair, whatever those, reduce the energy, here's what that would be worth. So here's where you are. I think I can get you better. Here's what it'd be worth if I could get you there. Now what we can do is talk about a pricing model that says, okay, fine. How do we align that so that, the risk reward exists? So kind of the 5th point in the previous slide was, okay, fine. Maybe I charge you this, but then you pay me when that happens. And yes, I understand there's a lot of variables. Hopefully in the Q&A sessions, we can get into those, but they're not near as risky as it sounds. I think the final slide in the procurement thing, this is my good friend now, Boinga Stenson. He goes, 5-6 years ago, the best practices were on the left. Get the best price that has the quality and delivery I need. I didn't consider all these other soft factors. And then he said this to me the first time, Todd, BTI, BTU. And I said, what? And he had a Swedish accent. So I'm like, what is he saying? I bring them in and I beat them up. Every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, I send a nasty letter. I threaten them. I do all these things to keep them on their toes, to keep them thinking. And I send them those letters that take no effort just to send out. Everything was, low impact, tactical, quickly. What we're talking about, collaborative, value-based, performance-based, soft factors included, and the like. And we will not go through all this slide, but this is just a bunch of research that says people that buy this way are more profitable. So a big industrial association, 8 years ago, said companies that chose suppliers based on all those different things were 35% more profitable. In the middle area there, you can see some quotes from some procurement professors saying, we've got to evolve from price, delivery, from total cost to this total value message. So these are the slides I would use with procurement people saying, it's not me saying change how you buy. There are people that have the research around it. So pricing, yes, you need to know your cost, but don't start with what your cost is. So one thing that I found is that I always looked at pricing, capturing the value. Well, that's consumer. We're a B2B world. But 2 books, a professor, good friend of mine now, was involved in these and presented them. And I'm like, wow, there's things I do in the B2B world when I'm trying to price for value that actually confuses the customer. So there's 4 things I want to touch on. One, the idea being I'm going to give the customer more choice. The more choice, the better. I'm going to give them 20 different bundles. This bundle, that bundle, the all-in bundle, the included the services bundle, the stripped down. I'm going to give them so much choice that they can choose what they want. You find that people are attracted to choice, but they don't like making decisions. There's buyer's remorse that comes in. Number 2 right away is, well, if you're charging me this for this, and next option's that means you're charging me this for this, you get into a line item price discussion. So give choice, but don't give too much choice. The question is, how many choices should you give? And I find with a lot of companies, especially products, but even with service companies now, they're saying, here's my offering, the $30 offering. I'm hearing the market say, we don't need the good value one or the good one. We need a value one. They mean low price. They don't mean value, by the way. We don't need that one. So let's create a low price, good enough version. And what you find, there's a lot of different research, but if you give people 2 choices like this, you'll get more and more people that will just go down to the $10 one. We go out for dinner tonight. Yeah, it's something special. Maybe the $30 one. The $10 one's good enough. So you actually find your average price goes down when you give 2 choices. What some interesting companies do using something called the linear effect is they create a decoy at the high end. So when you go into that restaurant, you see that Chateaubriand, you see that thing with the Chateaubriand with the champagne that's about, or that steak that's $89. That looks nice. The Wagyu, very nice. You want to know what? The $49 steak looks good enough. But if the $49 steak was the highest one, I would revert to the $33 one. Create an option. Maybe it includes more services. Maybe it includes guarantees. Maybe it includes 24-hour turnaround. Maybe it includes free people like jumping on planes instead of billing them your cost. The purpose of the $50 one is not to sell it. The purpose is to make the $30 one look good. Similar but different. This is the decoy effect. Again, 3 options. If I just gave you the 2 options, 3 and 7, we're going out for dinner afterwards. It's only myself and my girlfriend, not the whole family. Do we really need this? In this case, I've inserted a middle one. Nobody buys the $6.50 one. Everybody goes, well, for 50 cents more, look how much more I get. Same idea. We just changed the one that we're trying to get people to move off of. And for people that have a services background, same idea. Let's say it's visits to a gym. Let's say it's visit to a salon. Whatever it is. I could $129 per month for 1 visit a week, $154 for 2 visits. Well, my average cost is less with a $154, but do I really need to go 8 times a month versus 4? You'll find people will justify. I don't think the width is enough here, but if I create 159 all inclusive, nobody will take the other 2 options. And remember, the customer used to have just the 159, but they found people would look at the 159 by itself. People would say that's a lot of money. If I put those other 2 options in, somehow the 159 looks great. Trust me, there's a lot of research and B2B companies doing this also. And the last one is length of contract. Think of your home internet. You know, month to month, you can change when you want. There's a value and choice, $179 a month. Oh, I'm going to sign a whole 6-month contract to save $10. Now I'm sitting here going, is it worth it? What's choice worth to me? $10, which is whatever, 7%. I don't know which one I'm going to do. Whoop, $100 a month, but I got to sign up for 12 months. That looks like the greatest deal. Again, they always had the $100 one. They put the other 2 ones there to make the $100 one look like a good deal. And we're seeing a lot of this in the B2B world. I think everyone's heard of the, you know, power by the hour, the Rolls-Royce world. Great stuff, but there's a lot of other industries. So the solar world is doing it, the renewable energy world, the robotics world, in this case for the healthcare, big heavy industrial equipment, Caterpillar, you know, paid by the ton of dirt moved or rock moved. You know, I think my machine's better than somebody else's. I will provide the services to it. I will quantify that value, and then I will price you based on how it's delivered. This is happening more today than it was before. Again, the research is getting a little old, but again, COVID might have changed things. But I know a lot of companies that are offering outcome-based contracts. And for those that want, I mean, great book, but the research from a professor named Wolfgang Lager, he's at INSEAD outside Paris now. But you can grab the white paper, I can get it to you. But, you know, some OEM equipment people found that, you know, by just looking at the free services they were giving away, they got rid of a bunch that, you know, people were taking that they weren't willing to pay for. They bundled things. They created options, you know, the 2 to 3 option idea, and they turned it into charging for from a business perspective, and customers were happy about it. So I see the future of quantifying services and charging for them, and it's happening. Again, from a timing perspective, we will wrap up here. But as I finish through these, Nick, I promise 1 minute, but everything I talked about is based on a lot of research. So the academic relationships, not just on the pricing and quantifying and side, but on the procurement side. Some universities on procurement, procurement associations around the world. Trust me, Europe, Asia, Latin America, and North America. Todd, we want to buy value. How do we know what it is? How do we know what real value looks like? Number one, make sure they quantify it. So price will be the focus in the absence of value. It's got to be quantified. So with that, you know, I focus on helping people with value, the marketing around it, focusing on training with procurement, and then the pricing models. And there's my email, my LinkedIn connection there, but, you know, helping companies focus on what is value and getting paid for it. And if anybody wants to grab a copy off Amazon, it's around the world on any Amazon, on any bookstore. But a nice review is always appreciated. And with that, Nick, I will get us over to Brian to show us the tool.
Yeah, so great. Actually, we're gonna just skip the demo and go right to the Q&A if that's okay. But if anyone wants to see a demo of Leverage Point, we offer a platform that basically helps do what Todd talked about all presentation, which is conveying the quantified value of your products and services to your customers, and we find that our customers that do that see faster deal cycle time, improved deal size, and higher win rates as well. And you can, if you want a demo, you can fill it out in the exit survey, just indicate, and we can reach right out to you. And if you'd also like to follow up with Todd and inquire about, you know, leaning on his expertise in your organization, you can also indicate that in the survey as well. So with that, Todd, I've got a couple good questions for you. You ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So we have never, let me get my face up here too, so it looks like we're talking. We've never implemented pay for performance before. How and where do we start with that sort of contracting strategy?
I'll just give you the one quote that was my favorite one from my old boss. He goes, if I can discount 10%, relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but you know what I mean. How come I can't not discount 10% and put 10% fee at risk? There's actually no risk. So first of all, when we looked at it from that perspective, we said there's no real risk here, number one. Number two, you don't offer it to every customer every day all at once. So what's your walkaway point? I was going to do 10% price. I'm not going to do 10% price, but I'm going to deliver that every year. Even if you only got half of it, it's 5% free money. I signed about 200 of those agreements, and they always renewed when I was around. I think a lot of them are still renewing. So customers are even happy with it. So it's not something I would turn around tomorrow and market to the whole world, right? It's like, no, that's a key account. They want price. Do we have the ability? Do we have the knowledge and the way to do it? Do we have the people to do it? Well, then I'm playing with free money. I'm playing with free money on the table. That to me is where I would start before we try to make a big program around it.
Great. So in terms of which industries you see, you talked a little bit about the new rules of purchasing. Are there certain areas where you see businesses that you work with struggle with more than others?
It's interesting. I get comments, that all makes sense for big, huge companies because they've got the resources and the people to do the research and these types of things. But I also find in the mid and smaller size privately owned companies, it's even better because I run into less. That's not my benefit. At some point, that's somebody's money we're talking about. Hey, Bob, the CEO, if I save you 5% of energy because you spent a little bit more money over here and you have more money in your pockets, he can look holistically, where sometimes in big companies, you get that's not my backyard, or I don't get measured on that. So there's a lot of focus on the big companies going to the higher level people because they see the big thing. But the mid-level companies, I think, might be easier to do business with. And because it's more, I wouldn't say tangible, but it's back into the same wallet, can happen. And again, other industries, it's not just, the IT world's done it for a long time, but I'm saying, the capital equipment, with the lack of differentiation is so hard now. It's like, I better show that I can deliver value before just promising it in the past.
Makes sense. This one's kind of a blunt one, but do you see the era of free services going away for good in B2B?
Well, yes. If it's free, just think of how you act when something's free. You take it and half the time you throw it away. So real quick example. If anybody remembers, there's kind of the carrot and the stick. But if you used to check into a hotel and they would say, you want to know what? Don't get your room clean because it's good for the environment. Yeah, we might put the towels back up, but most people would get the room clean. Then some companies in some markets started to charge people for it. That was offensive. They're like, whoa, I paid for the hotel room, but they went the other way. They now reward people, right? If I reward you, so yep. I'm not going to use the customer name, but one company I do some consulting with, true story. The customer, free services, rush delivery. Customer calls the company, says, I need it now. Not my cost, but I'm huge, and work your butt off and get the stuff there. Salesperson shows up at the client a month later. The product is still sitting on the shipping floor, basically. I thought that was an emergency. Well, I just wanted it. If there was a trade-off that I'm going to make up number, it was 10,000, maybe you wouldn't have wanted it. So instead of charging this customer, I said, look, we're going to give you 4 free rush shipments a year. He says their behavior's already changed. Now I've just limited choice. It's amazing how it's changed. So huge customer, everybody else, maybe it's not 100%. Again, maybe we'll have another webinar getting these specifics. Yeah. But yes, I see people, and also there are value drains. How much time and money you spend giving away something that ends up as shelfware somewhere else that they don't use?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and look no further than a trash can at their most recent trade show to see all the free stuff people throw away. So
exactly, that's the best example. You walk by, it's free. The kids might like, then you leave it. I don't need this. I hate to use it. Crap. Yeah, it's like somebody spent money on that. What a waste.
Yep. Yeah. So we have one more question that I think is best answered. But Todd, you can take a stab at this if you want. We'll finish with this one. Can you comment on how to build an ESG consideration, so environmental, social, and corporate governance, and how you monetize those value drivers?
I can talk about just from some of the research that I've done. So take it for what it's worth, different industries. But in certain industries, the question is, what is the customer willing to pay? So there's actually research, believe it or not, that shows what are customers, end users, myself or Nick, to pay for sustainable packaging. So instead of just saying, it'd be good for the environment, the question is, what are customers willing to pay? And there's like 5 different pricing things you can use. And say, wait, customers are willing to pay in this marketplace this much more for that. A lot of other things now is we're starting to commercialize these things. So there's the selling value of it, but there's also the cost value, shipping, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that I've always played with is ESG, local sourcing. Instead of buying it from Asia. So yeah, we can talk CO2, we can calculate all that, but there's also less cost being local. Et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, there's a lot of research on share price and corporate governance and stuff like that. Trust me, a bunch of Fortune 500 companies don't spend all this money on ESG stuff because they feel it's good. Somebody's done the research, there's a payback there. So you can start putting some numbers to it. It might not be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's always a great starting point. And I'm really glad that question came in because that's actually going to be the topic of our next month's webinar. Before you go, please remember to pre-register next month's survey, exit survey for next month's webinar. What we're seeing right now is that our customers are increasingly setting sustainability goals, is increasing pressure to monitor, measure, and improve environmental outcomes. And what we're seeing is the most innovative B2B companies are moving fast to collaborate with their customers to deliver these products and services to meet their needs. So we'll be joined by our CEO, Peyton Marshall, and he'll be sharing what we're seeing in the marketplace, ways that leading global enterprises are introducing sustainability into their innovation, from product launch to strategic reviews with customers. This should be super timely and relevant for most B2B people. So please sign up in the exit survey. And that's going to be it for us today. So thank you so much to everyone that joined us today. Thank you, Todd, for your insights. And look forward to you joining us for our next webinar. Take care, everyone.